So, welcome to the inaugural podcast of the Feet to the Fire election podcast for Voice of OC.
Well, I'm honored to be the first feet in your fire, Norberto.
Well said. Rick Reiff, the Dean of the Journalism Corps here in Orange County, for years the leader on public affairs, programming, politics. It's in some ways it's a shame that you're still not on the airwaves at PBS. I still criticize our friends at PBS for not having an Orange County specific show. We were just chatting a minute ago about, before we get into elections, a little bit about the state of Orange County.
It's sad, and I'm ready to go back. I like to say I'm mostly retired now, but I'm always receptive to newsrooms, classrooms, or open mics. So I love this. Anytime there's an open mic, I can be there. So but no, it is sad that PBS, just went through a big merger, PBS SoCal with KCET. And so you've got this basically a public television superstation in Southern California. And right now they're doing other things they're dealing with, and they just aren't, to this point, doing anything in Orange County. And it's sad because Voice is the exception. You're the one news organization that has been growing. I'm still editor at large of the Orange County Business Journal, and we're still growing. But our lane is a narrow one. It's the business community, and that's what we do a good job at. And as far as covering what's going on in Orange County, Voice is it. We've got a daily newspaper that's shrinking. We've got another one up in L.A. that maybe sends somebody here, once a week or something. And so and no television. We're the largest community in the nation that doesn't have its own television coverage, because we're part of the Los Angeles market. And this. I've been preaching this forever. The closest analogy is Long Island, New York. Long Island, New York is part of the New York metropolitan market, but it's slightly smaller, but they're roughly the same size. But the difference is Long Island really is a bedroom community of New York City, but that's not the case in Orange County. And you go to Palm Springs, which is its own market. If you ever go to Palm Springs, one time I'm in Palm Springs on a weekend. They got 3 stations, and they're all reporting, the Indio police got a narc dog today. I think a narc dog. I'm sure that week Westminster got a narc dog or something, but you'd never hear that stuff. Whatever the news is in Palm Springs, people get it. We don't get that.
Totally true. And I have been in that market. It's a great market. Like you said, 3 TV stations, a big newspaper for a community of, I'm not sure what the numbers are in the Inland Empire or in that part of the Coachella Valley,
right.
But you're right. What you have here in Orange County is incredibly sad.
Well, if you go down to San Diego, they have everything. San Diego's the same size as Orange County.
Totally.
I was talking to a guy, when I was starting up the show, trying to convince him that he should be a sponsor, and is a very wealthy, successful guy. He said, Rick, the problem is nothing goes on in Orange County. And I said, no. I said, you don't think anything goes on in Orange County because you don't see it on the news.
No kidding. It's a politician's paradise. Here, you don't get a lot of accountability reporting. Right. You don't get a lot of pressure. We just chatted a minute ago. We're going into elections, and it is one of these things that you wonder how. The Iowa caucuses started today. Today is the day, February 3rd, that the Orange County Registrar of Voters begins mailing out vote-by-mail ballots. And yet the big question is, when you see these candidates in these races, do you feel like any kind of contact to what's really happening in the streets of Orange County? And
you teed that one up for me, didn't you? Because the quick answer is no. And that's one of the things we're going to get into these races. We'll probably be focusing a lot on the horse race aspect of these races. But something that I just find so depressing is that if you listen to these candidates, if you see the flyers they're going to be sending out to voters, they're going to be so detached from the real problems in Orange County. Let me just give one example. It's something that Voice has and the Register have both covered, and that's this issue now with Santana suing South County cities, and now I think they've limited the lawsuit to the county itself. But Santa Ana City suing the county. There's a public hearing, residents turn out in Santa Ana saying this is unfair that you want to put this homeless facility in our neighborhood. Why not put it in Irvine? And the whole gist of the Santa Ana lawsuit is that we're bearing the burden and nobody else is. That's all fine. But what it's coming down to is that, the argument immediately is in political terms. It's a zero-sum game, okay? It's us against them. We want it in Irvine. Irvine says we don't want it here. Well, the reality is nobody wants it anywhere, okay? The working class residents of Santa Ana don't want a homeless shelter in their neighborhood. The, white collar people in Irvine don't want it in theirs. And the whole political process is geared toward this turf battle. Who's going to have to bear the cost? Who's going to have to take these homeless people? Is it over here? Is it in the way we should? I mean, in an enlightened society, how about what do we have to do to get rid of homelessness? How do we get rid of homelessness? Not how do we decide these homeless people have to be here or there. Now, I realize in the short term you have to deal with that, but there's nobody stepping up and saying, how do we get rid of homelessness? And so what happens now is, and we're seeing it before our very eyes, there's a homeless industry sprouting up. Okay, so you have the advocates for the homeless, the lawyers and things who file lawsuits. You've got to let the homeless person sleep here because they've got nowhere else to sleep, and you've got that whole, thing. You've got the neighborhoods all saying we don't want it, in our neighborhoods, so they're all organized, and and then you have the business interests, people who are going to make money. What's the one thing people are pushing for right now? More housing. Got to build housing. Actually, the problem, I think, is unaffordable housing, okay? It's the price of housing, the cost of housing. And a lot of these things they say, oh, well, people are living together. That's how a lot of immigrant communities and stuff, grandpa,
Sure.
grandma will live with us. The kids will stay. A lot of that goes on. We could use some more units for sure, but it's not so much the lack of housing is the cost of housing. But what's the one thing we're going to do? We're going to build more housing. We're going to have more affordable housing. We'll be given taxpayer money to build more housing. And again, it's an industry that builds up that is managing a problem rather than solving a problem.
And yet we'll see homelessness mentioned in probably every single political campaign flyer that we see about champions of dealing with homelessness.
And what do you think the gist will be? I'm curious. What will be the point? I helped solve the homeless problem, or I kept the homeless facility out of my neighborhood? What's more likely?
I think it'll be both. I think some will see them will bill themselves as champions of dealing with the issue. Andrew Doe in the 1st District, the Republican supervisor, has made his entire campaign the fact that he's, for once, the county of Orange is dealing with homelessness, as you said, in a more maybe holistic way of asking yourselves, if you have a schizophrenic having an episode on a street corner, what's the point of sending an expensive police officer to, I don't know what, sit with him, escort him to a jail? So there's been some talk about that. Others, I remember Don Wagner, Republican in the 3rd District, ran basically on keeping homeless shelters out of Irvine. And again, to many residents, half-baked plan by the county, don't really know what you're doing. Just same thing at the residents in Santa Ana. You're going to put a low barrier facility in my community, and you're not going to equip us with any kind of the tools that we need to deal with very troubled people. You're just going to do a half a job. And that seems, again, to get into our election season here, it's the season of half jobs now, right? You'll get mail, especially in a market like Orange County now. This is where I think it's having really a big impact on our political races, because you see politicians who can basically stay under the radar for most of the year, come up during election season with a good war chest that they can hit the area in Facebook ads, like Michelle Steele's all over Facebook. My little 10-year-old boy the other day was asking me, who's Mike Bloomberg? I've seen one ad after another for Mike Bloomberg. But you won't see substantive debates. You're just going to see this one-way conversation in the mailbox. It seems like Orange County, really, we get a lot of mail here. But, that's where these races are going. And, I mean, obviously today we're going to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of some of these races, who's up against who, what issues are in play. you had a great point when you walked in, which was this is the first time, maybe in Orange County, that we've had a presidential primary where there's more Democrats, registered Democrats than Republicans.
Middle of last year, the registration numbers went slightly in the favor of the Democrats. You could certainly call that the Trump effect in Orange County, and maybe we'll get into that later.
Right.
But it's roughly, I think, 1.6 million registered voters and something, a little over 500,000 for both Democrats and Republicans. And then NPP, no party preference
right.
is a huge number too, over 400,000. But what we just found interesting just now as we were going through the numbers, just in the last several months, the Democrats have signed up something like 20,000 more registered to a handful, a few thousand for the Republicans. So they've actually increased their lead now. They've now 571,000 to 552,000. So the Democrats appear to be doing a really good job of registering voters. Now, historically, Republicans tend to turn out in higher percentages than registered Democrats. Although, again, the Trump effect, Donald Trump seems to be doing maybe still galvanizing Democrats.
He does seem to be the best organizer on the Democratic side. What do you think of all these new changes in voting? Do you think that'll tilt one way or the other? In terms of, I'm somewhat confused.
That's there's many fun things about this upcoming primary.
Mm-hmm.
And just as we mentioned, this is the first time, perhaps in history, certainly in decades of memory, that there will be more registered Democrats than Republicans in Orange County. We've also got a new, more open election process now. The mail-in ballots are going out, and I believe for the first time now, you don't have to put postage on it, and you don't have to request it. Every registered voter is going to get that ballot. I think in the past you had to request a write-in ballot, and as one who always did it that way, I know I had to slap on the forever stamp or whatever onto it, to mail it. Now apparently it's going to be postage free. It goes to every single voter, and they are now opening up a lot of polling places and 11 days of voting. So the actual official day is March 3, but 11 days before that, you can actually go in somewhere and vote. So this is going to be a much more open process. And finally, we've got California is now going to be a big cheese in deciding who the president is, because the primary, Super Tuesday, we're now going to be California is going to be part of that. So there's and finally, I think to the point you were making, we've got all these interesting little local races. It'll be more interesting, I think, in November than now. But we're going to be able to start reading the tea leaves of who's looking strong, who's looking weak.
There you go, Rick Reiff.
This was fun.
This was a blast.
Yeah.
Hope to have you back whenever you get a chance.
Well, if you beat my price,
Well, hey, it's been a blast. No. So stay tuned for the Feet to the Fire.
You should stipulate no price on this one. This was a freebie. This is a freebie, and I loved it.
Free. So there you go. First inaugural edition of the Feet to the Fire election podcast. Stay tuned to the website. Check us out on Podomatic, on Apple. We'll keep having updates throughout the election. Make sure to just stay in tune. Let us know what's working, what isn't. Stay in touch out there, and we'll see you at the next podcast.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks again for having us.